Many people think it's no big deal to own just 0.01 Bitcoin, but these very people overlook a statement by Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy, now just Strategy, that turns everything upside down. Because with 0.01 Bitcoin, you are ahead of 99.96% of the world's population. And that's rarer than being a millionaire, and rarer than owning beachfront property or other assets. That's why in this video I'll show you exactly what Michael Saylor said, why this should make you extremely bullish right now, and why you should own 0.01 Bitcoin. And of course, I'll also show you where you stand in the Bitcoin wealth pyramid, and I'll help you truly understand just how incredibly rare even small amounts of Bitcoin are. And you'll see why this window of opportunity is closing quickly. And before we continue, like the video. One thing is certain, most people will only realize the opportunity they've missed far too late. So let's dive in now. Before we talk about Michael Saylor's statement, we first need to understand how many people in the world own Bitcoin. And I already mentioned the distribution in another video, but now let's take a closer look at it again. The world population is currently around 8.1 billion people, and estimates show that about 106 million people own Bitcoin, which now corresponds to roughly 1.3% of the global population. Earlier data from 2023 suggests that about 74% of Bitcoin owners hold less than 0.01 Bitcoin, so around 26% own at least 0.01 Bitcoin. And if we apply that to the 106 million, we arrive at about 27.5 million people with at least 0.01 Bitcoin. That would be roughly 0.34% of the world population. Which means if you have that much, you're ahead of about 99.66% of people. Of course, these numbers aren't absolute, because the exact figure can vary. For example, one person might have multiple addresses, and the estimates are based on blockchain data. But the point remains. It's easy to underestimate this when you're in the Bitcoin community and constantly comparing yourself to people who seem to hold huge amounts of Bitcoin. Sometimes, for example, a small amount like 0.01 Bitcoin can feel almost worthless, but stick with me. By the end, you'll find out why 0.01 Bitcoin could soon be worth a lot of money. And if you broaden your perspective, you'll see just how early you are and how truly scarce Bitcoin is. First, let's look at Bitcoin ownership in the context of the available supply. You probably already know that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. This number is fixed. No central bank, no politician, no boss can inflate it. It was programmed into Bitcoin from the very beginning. As of mid-2025, about 19.89 million of the 21 million Bitcoin have already been mined, but it's estimated that at least 3.5 million are lost forever due to lost keys, destroyed hard drives, or early users who forgot they owned Bitcoin. And that brings us to an estimated circulating supply of about 16.4 million Bitcoin. But that doesn't mean all of it is available. Only about 2.3 million Bitcoin, around 14% of the circulating supply, are currently on exchanges, and that number is steadily decreasing. So that's the Bitcoin that can actually be traded. And this number has dropped rapidly by about 15% since November 2024. This means that Bitcoin's liquidity is evaporating while demand is rising. And now imagine if you divided those 16.4 million Bitcoin evenly among the world's population, you'd only get 0.002 Bitcoin per person, which is about 200,000 Satoshis. So if you hold more than 0.002 Bitcoin, you're already above the global average in terms of Bitcoin wealth. That might sound a bit lofty, but this is the reality of a truly scarce digital acetone that is rarer than gold, rarer than real estate, much rarer than Apple and Nvidia stocks, and rarer than many of the rarest collectibles. And to understand just how rare Bitcoin really is, less than 0.01 Bitcoin is held by about 78% of all Bitcoin wallet addresses. 0.01 to 0.1 Bitcoin accounts for around 64%. 0.1 to 1 Bitcoin only makes up 28%, 1 to 10 Bitcoin just 7%, and 10 Bitcoin or more, those are 1.2% of the wallets. And yes, of course, one person can have multiple wallets. Some exchange wallets also hold balances for thousands of users. So it's not perfect, but it's the best indicator we have to understand the distribution. And according to the best estimates, the actual number of individual holders is probably 3 to 4 times smaller than the number of wallets. And now, to understand the rest, let's take a look at the statement from Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy, the CEO of MicroStrategy, who is a passionate Bitcoin advocate. He says that for the first time in 100 years, there is a liquid alternative to government bonds with which you can capitalize such a company, meaning strategy. Bitcoin as a digital commodity with true digital scarcity, says Michael Saylor. If you think through the implications, Michael Saylor argues provocatively that the balance sheet is positive for capital, which theoretically means, according to Michael Saylor, that you can borrow an unlimited amount of money. And this is now extremely important for the Bitcoin price and for the 0.1 Bitcoin. The more money you borrow, the richer all participants become, and the higher the stock price rises, the more capital you can attract in turn. And this creates a positive cycle that turns traditional financial theories upside down. That means the more capital Michael Saylor raises, the more he can continue to raise. And for many, this is a breathtaking concept that blows apart every textbook from various universities like Harvard or Stanford, for example. Michael Saylor is referring here to the strategy of his own company, which has invested billions in Bitcoin and has thereby gained enormous value. He sees Bitcoin as the perfect digital asset which also makes companies independent from inflation and traditional systems. Let's just take a look at this now. For the first time in 100 years, there is a capital asset other than treasury bills that you can use to capitalize a publicly traded company on. That's liquid. Bitcoin is a digital commodity, a digital scarcity, and that's going to be the new money.
Theoretically, if you think through the implications of having a digital commodity that you capitalize a public company on, if it outperforms the S&P and is more volatile than the S&P, then you will have positively polarized the balance sheet of the company to capital, which means in theory, you can raise infinite money. And the more money you raise, the wealthier everybody gets, and the faster the stock price goes up, and the more money you can raise. And that's blowing people's minds, right? Because that's such a profound concept that the more money, the more capital I raise, the more capital I can raise. That breaks every textbook at Harvard and Stanford.
You heard what he said. And now let's compare the Bitcoin wealth tiers with traditional net worth classes and then talk about something that's extremely wild and concerns the 0.1 Bitcoin. To be among the top 10% of net worth in the US, you need about $1.2 million in assets. In the UK, it's around £600,000, and in Germany, it's about 1 million euros. But to make it into the top 10% of all Bitcoin holders, you only need about 0.1 Bitcoin. That's just $10,000, $12,000. That means if you own more than 10 Bitcoin, you're already among the billionaires, and I mean that in terms of relative scarcity, not the current dollar value. And here's the catch. Most of this traditional wealth takes decades of hard work in a job, building a business, climbing the property ladder, investing in stocks, navigating old financial systems, or being lucky enough to inherit valuable assets. Bitcoin offers a different path. It's not easy, but with time, discipline, and a long-term perspective, anyone can climb the Bitcoin ladder and build financial freedom. It doesn't require trust, banks, or permission to do so. You don't even need a lot of wealth to benefit from it, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. You can store it yourself, and if you're interested in that, click the link in the description below the video. You can hold Bitcoin for the long term and absolutely protect yourself from currency devaluation with Bitcoin. And that's regardless of what the stock markets or central banks do. And the great thing about this moment is that the barrier to entry is still relatively low, but that won't be the case for much longer. As adoption grows and the supply becomes scarcer, the different levels of Bitcoin wealth will become increasingly difficult to reach. One day, owning even 0.01 Bitcoin could be like owning an apartment in Manhattan in the 1960 SA decision that seems insignificant now, but will become legendary later. And you have to understand, if you own 0.1 Bitcoin, you hold a fixed share of the entire world economy and that forever. The maximum supply of Bitcoin is exactly 21 million coins. Your share is calculated as 0.1 Bitcoin divided by 21 million, which is precisely 1 in 210 million. And with Bitcoin as a global monetary singularity where everything from goods and services to land and future innovations is valued in Bitcoin. So, with that, you own 1 in 210 million of everything that exists, and that's what you need to understand now. With an estimated global value of $1 quadrillion, that would be roughly $4.76 million today. That means that 0.01 Bitcoin today would be worth $476,000. So, with 0.01 Bitcoin, you have enormous upside potential and very little downside risk. The upside is unlimited because future value creation, and this is what you need to understand, is boundless. Since money keeps being printed without limit, while the downside is only limited to your own investment. So, it is definitely worth studying Bitcoin thoroughly and acquiring some. 0.01 Bitcoin, as you've heard, could be worth $476,000 in the future because Bitcoin has unlimited upside potential. And if you want to learn more about this, you'll find more information in the description below the video, including how you can use Bitcoin to build your own crypto financial independence. And most people will only recognize this opportunity once it has passed. But if you're watching this now, you probably already understand it. You're early, Bitcoin is scarce, and you have the potential to play a completely different wealth game if you get involved. And if you liked this video and it helped you, then give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with someone who should see it. I'll see you in the next video. I wish you a wonderful day.